Okay, so I just I want to say that I saw the movie The Hobbit a few days ago, and it was an excellent movie. I just have to say, I loved it. I loved every part of it. It was amazing, and I just wanted to talk a bit about it, how I felt, and how it compares to Lord of the Rings. First of all, let's start about how it compares to Lord of the Rings. So, um. Lord of the Rings was much more serious, much more dark. The mood was much more intense, whereas The Hobbit, I think, was more fanciful, more comical, more, you know, more of a story a better story for your kids to see, but there are still a lot of really dramatic, really intense scenes in it as well. There was much more animation in The Hobbit, and it was filmed at much more frames per second. But Lord of the Rings is also more realistic. Like, you see the trolls in Lord of the Rings, they're all just like, "Arr." But the trolls in The Hobbit actually, like, say things and talk and stuff like that. So, that's, one of the big differences. There definitely aren't nearly as many funny parts in the Lord of the Rings that there are in The Hobbit, like Radagast the Brown and stuff like that. There's just some funny comical things. When you look at the book The Hobbit, it was definitely much more of a children's book, whereas Lord of the Rings was meant to be like an adult's book. So those are really the differences. And which one's better? I wouldn't say either of them are better. I'd say it depends what mood you're in, to tell you the truth. Um, Characters, I love the characters. The animation, just it was wonderful. It was a great movie, and especially the scenery too. That was one of the best parts, is the scenery and stuff like that. And also about the animations in The Hobbit. The Hobbit had way more animations, but there comes a point where you animate it to a certain level, and you can't get any more realistic than reality. And I feel like in The Hobbit, there's probably not a single realistic beam of sun, whereas there was in the Lord of the Rings. Well, it's probably all changed, just not as much, so it seemed to be more real. But I mean, that's just the thing. Like, The Hobbit looks more like you're in like a video game, whereas Lord of the Rings looks more like you're on a real life battlefield in a way. So depends. Lord of the Rings is just more darker and moodier. Yeah, but they're both, I'd say, equally good movies. Again, like, it just depends on what mood you happen to be in at the time to determine which one is better. What else do I have to say? As far as, I think, like, the messages involved in the movie and what some of the characters had to say was just amazing. Like, I liked a lot of the quotes. There's a lot of funny quotes. But, like, I just like to talk about, like, maybe some of the messages that were being taught. I don't know if Tolkien meant for them to be taught in the book or not. It's been kind of a while since I read it. But, some of the things, like when Gandalf looks at Bilbo and says, the key to knowing how to use a sword or whatever is not to, know when to use it, but to know when not to use it. In other words, if you can save a life, you should. And I think that's just an amazing quote from Gandalf. It's a valuable life lesson. The Bible says that he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, and that's kind of it's kind of like a similar concept if you think about it. If you don't need to use your sword, then don't. That's one thing I really liked. Another thing with the Goblin Kings is something Alex Jones brought out, was he said, "How dare you come into my kingdom armed?" It was sort of funny. It's like, the ways, like the values of what a sword or what a weapon is, and arming yourself and protecting yourself. You saw that message throughout the video several times when they're like disarmed for a while in the Goblin's chamber and stuff like that. So yeah, that was definitely a good point. When you saw, also one thing I noticed was relating to what Gandalf said about knowing when to not use a sword. Well, when Bilbo was invisible with the ring, he could have killed Smeagol, but he pitied him and he decided not to. And then you see the lines follow up in the Fellowship of the Ring, where Gandalf's talking to Frodo, and he says that maybe the reason Bilbo didn't kill Smeagol is because he pitied him. And then he goes on to a speech about, really inspiring speech about how, we all live to see such times, but that's not for them to decide only what to do with the times and so forth. And that was a really great speech by Gandalf, or Tolkien technically. He's the one that wrote it all. But, yeah, that's definitely an amazing part. And then another thing Gandalf said that I thought seemed to stand out was when he was like, "Oh, my lord, Saruman thinks that there's a great force or great power that keeps evil at bay. But I think it's the little things, the acts of kindness that count," or something like that. I think that, there's some points to stuff like that. I mean, I believe in God. I believe in a strong force that keeps evil at bay. But I think that what Gandalf says is essentially right. I do believe that a lot of times it is the little things that count more than you think, and you never know, because the little things you do could mean a whole lot to someone. You have no idea, and so I think that we should never underestimate the little things, and the little things could have definitely a much huger aspect than what we think, and I think, God, the Creator, He probably uses the little things to do what he needs, and you look at it and you can see, it's like the difference between Gandalf and Saruman's personality. Saruman is the head of the White Wizards. He's the most powerful wizard, and he's already starting to become a corrupt tyrant. And you can see Gandalf is more like that good doer. He's more into like the little people, like Saruman says, "Don't speak to me about Radagast the Brown. He's a fool. He's been eating too many mushrooms." Whereas Gandalf, when asked if Radagast was a great wizard, he's like, "Oh, of course I think he's a great wizard." Gandalf, the nice things he does, and he protects hobbits and stuff like that. And I definitely think that, that's suiting of Gandalf's character. That's sort of what he does, is protect the little people. Or at least that's what my grandma said, and she read all the books too, and she knows something about it. Being a fantasy geek is in my blood. No, I just so you know that. What else should I say? Oh yeah, about Saruman. You could tell he was becoming a tyrant. He was saying, "Oh, there's no evil necromancer here," but he was really just trying to cover for the fact that it really was all real, and he knew it, because he was figuring out about Sauron at that time. He's learning that it's still there, that there's still evil in Middle-earth, and so I think that, there's a lot of, good messages in the film that if you pay close attention to, you'll learn, and just not judging people and loving other people. Like, what's his name, Thorin, kept saying, "Oh, you're not a thief, Bilbo, you're not anything good like that." And then in the end, he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I was wrong about you," I think The Hobbit was a great film. It was great as far as animation. It was great, being fantastic, especially the Dwarf Empire at the beginning, and Rivendell. It was amazing, but it was great, and it had a lot of great messages, and some pretty funny quotes, like at the beginning, that thing about knocking the Goblin King's head into a rabbit hole and inventing the game golf, and is he a great wizard or is he more like you? It's kind of funny like that. So, yeah, those are pretty much my opinions on The Hobbit. Auf Wiedersehen.